If you scroll through the spiritual zoo of social media today, you will hear the same message on repeat. You are God. You are perfect. You have arrived. You will shift into a new earth. 2026 will be amazing. Oh, really? So all humans are on the same exact page in spiritual development. And we are all going to board our magical cosmic surfboard and whoosh through the cosmos through a bright white light and live happily ever after. Or how about, I channeled Archangel Michael? Or I saw Charles Manson in hell during my near-death experience? It goes on, doesn't it? Do these people actually take themselves seriously? But if you actually study the ancient records, if you dare to open the Stanzas of Dzyan, you won't find a story of instant godhood. You will find a crime scene. Helena Blavatsky didn't describe our ancestors of the Lemurian and Atlantean epochs as beings of pure light. She described a humanity that was mindless, desperate, and prone to horrific errors. She described the sin of the mindless, the era when early man didn't look up to the stars but looked down into the animal kingdom. Today, we are looking at the darkest chapter of human evolution. The mating with the she-beasts, the creation of monsters, and the genetic karma that we are still working off today. Forget the ego trippers and fairy dust inhalers that sell feel-good clickbait to keep their algorithms ticking. Remember, for most of them, content creation is their full-time job. It pays their bills. But what follows is the history they have no clue about. If you are familiar with ancient texts or have read esoteric works, then you understand the 7 root races, planetary spheres, and global chains, and that mankind evolves over enormous spans of time. And this is not the Charles Darwin evolution hypothesis, which is still looking for a missing link. This video will not speak about root races 1 and 2, which are the Polarians and Hyperboreans, because at this stage of our unfolding development, we had not reached physicality. The early stage of the Lemurians also was not physical but more etheric. Only in the last stage of the Lemurian epoch did mankind become physical beings. The earth had cooled, humanity hardened into giants of flesh and bone. By the way, this is also when gender separation began. Therefore, this discussion will begin in the 3rd root race, Lemuria. Scripture agrees with history and tradition in saying, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. The secret doctrine teaches that the sons of God were the spiritual Dionysus, who produced the first human race of giants. Helena Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine, Vol. 2, pp. 279 and 336. Why does she use this biblical quote? Blavatsky explains that the Bible is actually recording the transition from the 3rd root race, Lemurians, to the 4th root race, Atlanteans. In those days refers to the Lemurian epoch, when man was naturally gigantic, 60+ feet tall. And also after that refers to the Atlantean epoch, when they were still giants but shrinking down to 20-30 feet. At this stage, the later Lemurian epoch, humanity possessed physical bodies, but the higher spiritual entities, the sons of wisdom, refused to enter them. They deemed the bodies too coarse. This refusal left the majority of early humanity mindless, without manas. They were empty shells. They had instincts, but no self-awareness. Of course, they had no moral compass. They wandered the earth simply following natural urges. The I Am consciousness had not entered them. This was the era of the separation of the sexes. The androgynous form had split into male and female. The coats of skin was complete. For the first time in history, the sexual urge awoke. But there was a fatal problem. The Bible in Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothed them. Religion says these were clothes. Esoteric philosophy says the coat of skin was the physical body itself. The creators, the Elohim, built the hardware, but they could not write the software. They could not give man a mind. So early man was just a beautiful, empty shell. He had no self-awareness. And so, the stanzas of Dzyan tell us exactly what happened next. The text says, "The men of the third race, those who had no spark, took huge she-animals unto them." These were not the animals of today, but the she-beasts of the Miocene period. Gigantic prehistoric creatures that shared a similar physiology to early man, but belonged to a completely different kingdom. Because these men had no mind, they saw no difference. They committed the act in ignorance. They took these she-beasts as mates. Blavatsky is specific here. These she-animals were not the apes of today. They were distinct, gigantic species of the Miocene era, prehistoric monsters that belonged entirely to the animal kingdom. Because the Lemurian men had no mind, they saw no difference between themselves and these beasts. These offspring were not apes. They were a hybrid missing link, half human potential, half animal instinct. It is from these monsters that the anthropoid apes of today descended. This turns Darwinism on its head. Man is not the evolved son of the ape. The ape is the degenerate grandson of the mindless man. But actions have consequences, regardless of intent. The offspring of this unnatural union were the crooked monsters. Science has spent 2 centuries looking for the missing link between ape and man. Blavatsky tells us they are looking at it backwards. These offspring were the ancestors of the anthropoid apes. The chimpanzee and the gorilla are not our fathers. They are the bastard children of the early Lemurian era. They contain a drop of human blood mixed with the animal kingdom, trapped in a form that cannot fully evolve. If the story ended there, it would be a tragedy. But it didn't end. Millions of years later, during the 4th root race, Atlantis, the sin was repeated. But this time, it was different. By now, the sons of wisdom had fully incarnated. Humanity possessed intellect. They knew good and evil. Yet, despite their intellect, or perhaps because of it, the Atlanteans sought power. They remembered the ancient hybrid lineages that still roamed the earth. Blavatsky explains that the Atlanteans renewed the sin of the mindless. They bred with these semi-human creatures intentionally. Why? To create workers, to create stronger bodies for dark rituals, to create talking men who were physically powerful but intellectually enslaved. This was black magic. It was a conscious violation of nature's laws. This accumulation of heavy karma is specifically listed as one of the spiritual causes that led to the sinking of Atlantis. The Bible remembers the Atlanteans too. It calls them the Nephilim. In Genesis chapter 6, we read, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." This is not a romance. This is the second fall. The sons of God were the spiritual elite of Atlantis, the giants who possessed the third eye. But they fell in love with matter. They looked at the physical beauty of the lower races, the daughters of men, and chose lust over wisdom. This mixing of bloodlines didn't create apes. It created a race of powerful, intelligent sorcerers. It was this corruption of the Nephilim that eventually led to the Great Flood, washing the slate clean for our current race, number 5. The daughters of men, the lower subrace, were not a separate species. They were simply the later, more materialized subraces of Atlantis who had lost the spiritual connection. Here is how that split happened. In the early days of Atlantis, the 4th root race, humanity was fairly unified. But as the cycle progressed, a split occurred. The sons of God, the initiates. These were the groups who secluded themselves. They maintained the connection to the divine, the monad. They kept their third eye active. They lived in the mountains or sacred islands, like the White Island. They prioritized spirit over matter. The daughters of men, the crowds. These were the masses of the later sub-races, specifically the Turanians and Semites of the Atlantean epoch. They became obsessed with physical life, the body, and the senses. They were physically beautiful because they were fully invested in the material world, perfecting the physical form, but they had lost the inner light. The lower race weren't created separately, they devolved spiritually while evolving physically. As the Atlantean race aged, their physical bodies became denser, more symmetrical, and more sexually attractive, hence fair. Simultaneously, their spiritual organs, like the third eye, which today is the pineal gland, began to atrophy from disuse. The result? You ended up with a population that was physically stunning but spiritually hollow. These were the daughters of men. In other words, they were the masses of Atlantis who had forgotten their divine origin. As the fourth root race progressed, the majority of humanity became obsessed with the physical world. Their bodies became beautiful, but their spirits went to sleep. The sons of God were the few who had kept the spiritual flame alive. The tragedy is that the guardians fell in love with the unguided. The teachers mated with the students. And in doing so, the light of wisdom was extinguished by the lust for form. So, who survived the chaos of the flood of Atlantis? The Bible tells us of Noah. Esoterically, Noah was not a simple farmer. He was an Atlantean. He represents the minority of the fourth root race who remained pure. While the Nephilim, the sorcerers, were nearly all destroyed by their own karma in the Great Flood, the sinking of Atlantis, Noah escaped. He was the seed man, a progenitor for the next root race, which is our current root race number 5. He carried the genetic and spiritual blueprint of the old world into the new. We are not the children of the apes. We are the children of the survivors, the Atlanteans. Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and others often warned that our current fifth root race will rapidly develop intellect and technology, similar to the Atlanteans, and risks falling into the same trap of using power for material control rather than spiritual growth. What happened to the dark magi of Atlantis? Did they perish, or did they just change their clothes? Esoteric philosophy teaches that time is cyclical. The souls who abused power in the fourth root race have not vanished. They have reincarnated. The ancient Greeks used the word pharmakeia to describe the use of drugs, potions, and spells. Pharmakeia means sorcery. Today, we see the same drive to manipulate nature, but we call it by different names. Genetic modification, DNA splicing of humans with animals, weather manipulation. A newborn infant is injected with pharmaceutical concoctions shortly after birth. Life and all systems are being controlled artificially. Are these new discoveries? Or is it the old Atlantean sorcery returning in the guise of modern science? The sin of the mindless was a mistake of ignorance, but what we are seeing today looks suspiciously like the sin of the Nephilim, a conscious, deliberate attempt to rewrite the laws of nature. One may be asking, how can a Lemurian human that obviously carries human DNA procreate with a creature of the animal kingdom? To understand this answer, let's turn back the pages of time. At one point in Earth's evolution, it was a gaseous, spiritual entity. After billions of years, it began to solidify, and this manifested a fiery ball. After more time passed, the Earth began to slowly cool to the point where the surface was more like a hot, volcanic environment. After more time, it evolved into a watery or etheric sphere. Let me ask you a question. Can a fish live out of its environment? Can mankind live in a fish environment? Environment dictates form. Physics dictates environment. As Earth passed through its stages of evolving, the laws of physics also evolved. As these laws evolved, the environment evolved. On Earth we have gas, liquids, or etheric fluidity, and we have solid material. Mankind, just as Earth, passed through the gaseous spiritual state, then to the etheric fluidity state, and then into a fully crystallized or hardened material form. It was while in the more fluid state of Earth, where the boundaries and limitations between animal and man were at their most permeable. A mule is a man-made hybrid of a donkey and a horse. It is created unnaturally, so therefore a mule is not capable of reproduction. In the Miocene era, the boundaries were easily crossed, and reproduction did occur. Now, what about those sons of wisdom that refused to bestow mankind with manas, mind, and intelligence? If you recall, this refusing, this delay, led to the mindless ones, the dumb ones that knew not wrong from right. Let's recall the specific stanza from Helena Blavatsky in her book The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888. Stanza 7, verse 24. The sons of wisdom, the sons of night, ready for rebirth, came down. They saw the vile forms of the first third, the early Lemurians. We can choose, said the lords. We have wisdom. Some entered the chaya, shadows. Some projected the spark. Some deferred till the fourth. Let's engage deeper. The breakdown of the host. Blavatsky explains that the spiritual host was divided into three groups. The obedient, those who incarnated immediately, producing the first self-conscious humans. The projectors, those who gave a spark but didn't fully enter. The rebels, the one-third, those who deferred. They refused to enter the bodies because they were disgusted by the coarse matter. These are the Luciferic entities who abandoned early humanity. The ye shall not die promise in the garden. The problem, because one-third refused to enter, the sin of the mindless occurred. Man mated with animals. The realization. The rebels realized that by waiting, they had made things worse. Their destined bodies had been defiled. The descent, or the fall. They were forced by karma to enter the bodies anyway, but now the bodies were impure. The promise. Once they finally entered, the eating of the fruit, they endowed man with self-consciousness. An animal dies and ceases to be. A man, with the Luciferic spark, knows he is an eternal soul. Therefore the serpent was right. Ye shall not die. Spiritually, even though the body must die. An animal dies and ceases to be. A man, with the Luciferic spark, knows he is an eternal soul. Therefore the serpent was right. Ye shall not die. Spiritually, even though the body must die. The karmic penalty, Prometheus bound. Blavatsky explains that because they abandoned humanity initially, these sons of wisdom suffered a heavy punishment. They had to spend millions of years chained to these dense material bodies, us. This is the true meaning of Prometheus being chained to the rock. The rock is the physical human body. The vulture eating his liver is the pain of physical life. If I am recalling correctly, there is a statue of Prometheus at the Rockefeller Center in New York City. Confusion usually comes because people think Lucifer and Satan are the same entity in the same time frame. Esoterically, they represent two different stages of the same event. The descent of spirit into matter. The bright morning star before the fall. Biblical Lucifer is the son of the morning, beautiful and high. Esoterically, these are the Manasaputras, sons of wisdom, or the lords of Venus before they incarnated. They existed in the astral mental planes. They were pure intellect and light, hovering above the physical earth, the garden. The tragedy is the refusal and the fall. The biblical war in heaven occurs, and Lucifer is cast down. Esoterically, this war was the refusal to incarnate, followed by the forced incarnation. The fall wasn't a punishment for being evil. It was the act of falling into a physical body. To a spirit made of fire and light, being trapped in a heavy, hairy, sweating coat of skin, a physical body, is hell. The pit is the earth itself. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. This verse, Revelation 12:12, is the most profound part. Why woe? Before the fall, the mindless men were dumb giants. They ate, slept, and mated. They were animals, but they were content. They had no anxiety, no guilt, and no existential dread. After the fall, the devil comes down. Once the Luciferic mind entered the body, suffering began. Now man knew he was naked. Vulnerability. Now man knew he would die. Fear. Now man could calculate how to hurt others. Evil. The devil that came down isn't a guy with a pitchfork. The devil is the intellect trapped in matter. The woe is because the moment human beings gained a mind, human beings gained the capacity for moral evil. Humans couldn't sin before, now we can. The great irony? Lucifer, the light-bringer, gave us the ability to think, analyze, create, and be self-aware. This is the good aspect. Satan, the adversary. That same mind, when used for selfish material desire, becomes the devil. So the bright morning star fell into the mud of the earth and got dirty. The tragedy is that the pure spirit is now struggling to control the beast it lives inside. Yes, mankind is in a spiritual war. It's all around us, and deception is a great and deadly weapon. By deception, they wage war, from a very dim consciousness to a self-consciousness, which is the I am, to Christ consciousness. Our journey continues. No, we are not gods yet. The potentiality is there, but mankind is barely above the threshold of a brute. The little earthly ego in mankind must first be sacrificed. We are in the age of Michael. Along with this, some souls have been transitioning into Root Race 6. More on this specifically in my next video.